Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, 2 years after the pandemic first hit, Shawn Busse, Jay Goltz, and Liz Picarazzi talk about what they've learned, what they're doing differently, and whether their businesses have gotten weaker or stronger. Leading up to the pandemic, Shawn, still carrying scars from the Great Recession, did a series of workshops on how to prepare for the next recession. And so in that regard, he tells us, we were really well prepared for the pandemic. Plus, public companies are increasing prices aggressively and then bragging on earnings calls about the extra profits those increases are generating. Is there a lesson in this for privately owned businesses? Also, why does Jay seem more invested in his picture frame business than in his home furnishings business? Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which highlights the most important news of the day for business owners and which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Shawn Busse, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. Jay Goltz, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. And Liz Picarazzi, who is CEO of City Bin, which is based in Brooklyn, New York, and makes trash enclosures and package bins. The episode is titled, We Are Survivors. Welcome, Shawn, Jay, and Liz. I want to start today by noting we are now recording our 100th episode, and I guess I would emphasize two things. Most importantly, I'm really grateful that the three of you and the rest of our crew agreed to do this. You guys talk about things in public here that a lot of business owners won't talk about in private, so thank you for that. I would also note we certainly picked an interesting time to do this. We started right before the pandemic. We got just enough time to get to know each other a little bit before things got interesting. I had been worried before that about whether we'd run out of things to talk about. That hasn't been a problem. So it's our 100th episode. It's also almost exactly 2 years since Jay told us that he wasn't convinced the pandemic was coming to Chicago, and the reality of the whole situation eventually hit us. So I'd like to start by talking about that a little bit. Maybe I'll start with you, Liz. You weren't part of the podcast team at that point. Can you go back 2 years and remember what you were thinking when things got serious?
Sure. I was definitely panicked. Panicked partly because I had just made a gigantic inventory order and was flush with inventory, but lost like 70% of my business in March and April of 2020. So I was very undercapitalized and very much needed PPP.
Which you didn't know you would even exist for quite some time.
If we're going back from the very beginning, yeah. So I was scared for my employees in New York City at the time. The COVID rate was incredibly high. I had several employees became sick. And, it really was, as a business owner, really scary because you lose your revenue. You're worried about your employees. Everything. It was nothing but worry.
How about you, Shawn? Do you remember what you were thinking at the time?
Yeah, I was, in hindsight, fortunate in that I had two things, which was I had a friend who was Chinese and very connected into what was going on in China. And what she was telling me and what the media was saying were really different. And so it gave me a head start in terms of my awareness. And then I also had some clients who are engineers, and they're just very kind of oriented around data and facts. They were like, this is going to be really bad. We're closing our office today. And I was like, whoa, so I think being in a business where we serve other businesses gave us a real advantage in terms of appreciating how significant it was going to be. So from there, we took action really quickly. I went through the Great Recession and didn't appreciate how bad it was going to be until it was really too late. And so in this time, I thought we were going to have another Great Recession. I thought for sure it was sort of I was reading papers that were kind of titled things like the economic ice age. So, we went at everything really hard, not only in terms of safety, but also strengthening client relationships, supporting clients, just doing everything we could to really prepare to batten down the hatches, because we didn't know that PPP would come. We didn't know that the government was going to print money like there was no tomorrow. So we went at it really seriously.
Did you start cutting costs? Did you have to lay people off?
No, the one thing we said to the team was the very last thing we are going to do is impact people's jobs. So, we were willing to walk away from leases. We were willing to pretty much do anything other than that. And we made that really clear because we felt it was really important to provide a sense of safety and dependability. Just because it was the right thing to do, and B, I just think that that's what leaders need to do when times are hard, is to really convey that they're there for their people.
Jay, I apologize for taking a cheap shot at you once again. About
I guess I'm used to it, so it didn't mean that much to me.
I know you are. Do you remember when?
No, absolutely. No. You'll notice I didn't jump in. That was an actual portrayal. I wasn't sure it was coming here. It was too hard to even fathom. And it came. And I would also say there's 6 other things over the last 40 years that didn't happen. It's just I kind of got numb to getting all, anxious about stuff because 5 out of 6 times, whatever you think is going to happen doesn't happen. So in this case, it did happen. And I'm the first to admit, thank God for PPP.
So next question. I'd like to ask each of you, is your business stronger or weaker today than it was before the pandemic hit?
I'm the first to say Nietzsche's whatever doesn't kill you will make you stronger. My company's definitely stronger. We got through one more thing and my staff is fine-tuned and, I think we're better off.
It wouldn't have been obvious 2 years ago that would happen.
I had some people that they had done a good job for many years, and for whatever reason, it was just time to move on to something else, and they were worn out or whatever. And it just was a little bit of the Great Resignation isn't necessarily unhealthy. I mean, it forced people to take action that they should have taken. And in my case, it just fine-tuned the organization. I've hired probably 7, 8 great new people that are bringing new perspectives that are excited to be here that, are re-energizing the company.
Liz, how about you? Do you think your business is in a stronger or weaker position today?
In a much stronger position. Thankfully, last year we doubled revenue, and this year we're on track to do the same. I think a lot of it has to do with the economy improving and having a stronger staff. But I do think a lot of it has to do with the lessons that we learned in the pandemic, particularly around cash flow and supply chain issues. So with cash flow, as I mentioned earlier, we really found ourselves undercapitalized in those early spring months.
So what did you do?
Well, we had PPP. That was a big part of it. We negotiated extensions on bills with suppliers, whether it be the warehouse, our factory, our landlord, extending it out a couple of months. And luckily, all those debts we were able to pay off. But at the time that we asked for them, we didn't know if we were going to pay it off. And that was really terrifying to be on the hook for all that inventory that I had just, purchased. I have trade terms with my factory. And then the other thing I would say about being better is everything having to do with supply chain. So we used to order every 2 to 3 months, and we were on that sort of a cadence. Well, during the pandemic, when there was those supply chain blockages, as there still are, we need to order much larger quantities because we kept selling out. So every bit of the supply chain we've come to understand a lot better. Even at the very end of it, when trucks at the port were not showing up, drivers not showing up to bring our product to the warehouse, that was something that my staff for months was always negotiating. Things were changing. The price was changing. The timing was changing. So we really had a greater appreciation for how supply chain issues can affect everything. They can really affect customers with the timeline we get them product, but it also ties up resources of the team. I can't tell you how many times I felt like the whole team was tied up dealing with containers, trucks, FedEx, shipping, tariffs, you name it. It was really time consuming. And we're in a much better place with that. We've really smoothed out our operations. Our cadence for buying is we're buying a lot more at a time. And we've changed some of our vendors who weren't very good at supply chain management. And that was a big aha. We used to work with a company that I'm sure everyone's heard of called Flexport. That is kind of like the Uber of ocean freight shipping. And we found that they really didn't have the visibility onto the containers that we thought they would have. And so we recently shifted to a smaller freight forwarder and freight carrier that we can just call on the phone and we can find out where everything is and at every step of the supply chain. So that's one big change we made. We thought we were going with a big name brand company, but they ended up really not having the information we needed. Shifts with vendors, generally speaking. We made some very smart shifts with vendors and with processes, and that has put us in a really good position.
How about you, Shawn? Same question.
Yeah, I think this is such a great question. I think I'm reflecting on it, and I think that it's if I were to break it down into four pieces, the areas of the company I think about: marketing, operations, clients, and culture. And sort of working backwards from there. The culture has actually, I think, in many ways grown stronger and kind of more connected. I think to Jay's point, stresses can either drive people apart or bring them together. So I think the culture has really actually done really well through this, with one asterisk, which is we've been remote for so long. I think it's really difficult for newer employees. So I'm trying really hard to make them feel more welcome and to bring them into the culture. But those who've been with us a long time, largely it's been mostly good. There's some pretty big asterisks though. Clients, I would say they really stuck by us and we also really stuck by them. And then I think the two that have been hardest hit would be operations, which is, being a virtual company is really nice on paper. But, missing that collaboration in person and seeing each other and being delighted by somebody coming into the office, I think that's our form of operations. And then lastly, marketing. That's the area where we were most harmed by this. Our marketing strategy before the pandemic was speaking, workshops, and events. So like overnight, our entire marketing strategy was really rendered pretty ineffective.
Have you found something to replace that?
Yes, going on the 21 Hats podcast. We found imperfect replacements. Virtual events, they're okay. We hosted our Catalyst Summit this year. The second one was virtual. Both of them were virtual, and I think they were really good events. They're just not as impactful as when you're in person. So we're still working on it.
There will be some companies that are severely hurt by this, though, that have taken that approach because they don't have the stomach to tell their employees, yeah, you know what? We hired you to be in the office and we need you to be in the office.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, too, in terms of how the folks in our company where they work in tight-knit teams and they collaborate a lot, they actually are doing pretty well through this. But it's the folks who are more in a silo type of a role. Even myself, I would put myself in that. Like it was really hard for me emotionally. It's very difficult these last couple of years because I'm generally not working on a team in the same way. And that I think that's really hard. The remote thing, if you're in isolation, plus the added stress, of childcare and all that stuff. Yeah, that's hard.
So, Shawn, that was all really interesting, but you didn't quite answer the question. Do you think you're in a stronger or a weaker position today?
Well, I think the question's flawed because
you said it was a great question.
There you go. There you go. I didn't think I could like you anymore, Shawn. There you go.
Yeah, I mean that's a typical journalist, 5 things you need to do, or 10 ways this company's been successful.
I'm in pain.
Wow.
Oh, poor Lauren.
No, Lauren is not one of those list maker journalists.
I know. I just think that running a business is so complex, and to really try to understand if you're stronger or weaker. I think you got to look at it through at least those 4 dimensions that I talked about. Because we lived through a recession before, we had actually been doing a whole bunch of workshops on how to prepare for a recession.
Wow.
Leading up to the pandemic. And preparing for a recession and a pandemic is the same thing. You can't affect a recession. You can't affect a pandemic. What you can do is you can affect how you prepare for them and how you behave in them. And so in that regard, we were really well prepared. We were well capitalized. We had a really good business model. We had no debt. We had high levels of engagement. We had great customers. So we did as good as we could have, I think, to go through it.
So here's why I asked this terrible question. It strikes me that everybody on this podcast pretty much can make an argument that they are in a better position today than they were 2 years ago. And I'm curious what you think about that. Do you think that's representative of businesses around the country? Do you think this is just a self-selecting group?
It's survivor bias, Lauren.
Yeah, the ones that are in better shape aren't on this podcast because they're out of business.
Right.
Oh, no, but nobody went out of business.
Well, but that's what I mean. It's survivor bias. You're talking to the survivors, right?
I got to tell you, I'm not delusional. The PPP thing was a major game changer, and without it, I don't know if I'd be here. I mean, it's the PPP kind of artificially kept some of us in business that maybe didn't have enough depth to stay through it. So,
Well, I have a theory.
Please.
Bring it, Liz.
Everybody who is in the podcast has either been a listener or a panelist. So we're a group of people that are connected to 21 Hats. We're inquisitive. We're curious. We like to learn from each other. I think that those sorts of people are probably going to survive.
I thought you were going to say it was 21 Hats that got all of you through it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
No, she has a good point.
That is what I was saying, but I'm saying there's a certain type of person that is drawn to 21 Hats, and we are survivors.
Yeah, they're showing up and they're trying to improve themselves. No question about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great theory, Liz.
I just read a great quote. Howard Tolman, who I get his emails every other day, and I don't know that he made this up or whether this is his. I don't think so.
He's an entrepreneur in Chicago.
Yes, and he writes for Inc. magazine frequently. He used the phrase, entrepreneurs are hope dealers. Now, I don't know if he made that up. I don't think he did, but that's an interesting phrase. They're hope dealers. Like most people that I know who are successful in business have a positive, hopeful attitude, because I don't know how you could survive long term without it. But so my point is maybe we're all delusional and we're just telling you what we want to believe.
Liz, I'm curious, were you listening to the podcast when the pandemic hit? Had you found it at that point?
I think I had, and I do believe it was an invitation from Paul, who I've known for several years. So I came in probably right at my crisis point where I was having literal meltdowns, like emotional meltdowns, being scared and worried about PPP. And, I know for me, the podcast was very kind of comforting. I know that there was one episode when I think one of the participants got a PPP and the other one didn't. And there was a discussion about it. And that was really helpful because I was one of those that did not get the PPP in the first tranche. And I was really pissed and angry. I was so angry. It was awful. That was one of the meltdowns. It was the Saturday after the first tranche was announced, and Shake Shack, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, and a couple other publicly traded companies received the money. And I had one of the biggest meltdowns of my life. I don't have that many meltdowns, but it was that bad. I was so emotional about it. I felt so cheated. But I'm so glad it turned around. Like, it kind of restores my faith that government can help small businesses. But is a very desperate feeling. And at the time, I was also spending a lot of time with other small business owners who also didn't get the loan. So we would get on these Zoom calls and just bash everything, bash the government, bash, the Treasury Secretary, we really went to town on him. But for me, to answer your question, I was a listener at the time, and it was very therapeutic. It was very instructional, and I ended up getting my way through it.
Dana didn't get it, and Laura and I got it, and we had some guilt that we got it and she didn't, and we discussed giving her some money.
That was emotional. It was difficult.
Yeah, no, it was. That was a difficult period.
Well, Liz, if you don't mind me asking, what was the reason you didn't get it in the beginning?
Oh, it was just the very first tranche, and very few small businesses got it.
Oh, okay. So you got it eventually.
I got it in the next wave, which is when most small businesses were funded, but very few, unless you had really good connections with banks, very few businesses got it in the first tranche.
Or if you just happen to be at the wrong bank. That was just the lottery of what bank do you happen to be at, and are they on top of it? I mean, that was sad.
Yeah, not every bank was eager.
And I'm no longer at Chase because of the way they handled it.
And Jay has harped on this a lot, but I will just pile on with him, which is if you are a small business, it is absolutely not in your self-interest to be with a large bank. They do not.
Amen.
They do not care about you.
That's just not what they do.
And that's the thing is like when you need them, they will not be there for you. And so to find a community bank, to find a credit union, like anyone who cares about your business is better than a large bank.
Because they need to, because that's their bread and butter. Chase does not need you. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, that was very clear. I'm with a community bank now, and it was very deliberate.
Jay, one of the things I remember is before the pandemic hit, you were talking about your struggles with managing your inventory, and you were concerned that you had bought way too much inventory.
Yes.
In fact,
yes.
I think at one point you said to me, not on the podcast, if I didn't own the business, I would be fired right now. Then the pandemic hit and you were very glad to have that inventory.
I had inventory up the yin yang, and then all of a sudden I'm the only guy that has inventory. So it turned out to be a blessing. And that worked out just fine. Sometimes luck is okay.
So have you changed the way you manage your inventory? How do you?
You know what? There are 3 gauges on our dashboard. There should be. When you start out, you think it's all about growth, and then you think it's about profit. No, the first gauge is cash. That's the first gauge. That's the one that's going to kill you. So there's the cash, there's profit, and there's growth. And I've learned lately, especially, I just have a backup of I'm okay financially because as I've discussed many times, I took out a mortgage on the property, not too much, just a very conservative loan. And I made sure I got enough cash. So the fact is, if I have too much inventory, it's okay. I can afford to have too much inventory. It's fine. It's not going stale or something.
You know, for years, you had these consultants running around talking about lean and just in time, and you're such a loser if you have inventory. And really what they were arguing against was creating any kind of resiliency in the business. And I think what the pandemic has shown is that just focusing on growth and reducing costs exposes you in a massive way. And so what cash is and what inventory is and what investing in culture is, these are all like resilience tools that help you get through unexpected things. And I just think the pandemic highlighted how many businesses were just sort of living on this like hair's thin line between death and continuing operation.
There's nothing inherently wrong with inventory if it doesn't go bad, if it's solid inventory. Keep in mind, interest rates are so cheap right now, with it almost the same as inflation. It's okay if you can afford to have too much inventory. It's not a big sin. It's when you can't afford to have too much inventory that it's a big sin. If it sucks up your cash for other purposes and you don't have any money to pay your bills.
Well, Jay, you also have the privilege of owning your warehouse. So having a lot of inventory like I do and paying a 3PL to house it, those supply costs, those storage costs are massive. So I think your inventory perspective has got to be informed by your real estate.
There's no question that's part of the formula. You're right. But I have to tell you, I made what looked like a bold move in 2008. My accountant didn't recommend it. I bought the big cheap building at a super cheap price because real estate was just nobody was buying anything. The realtor literally said to me, "You're the only person interested in this building. You need to do something." And I actually said, "Well, I can't get a loan for it right now. If you want, I'll buy it on a 2-year, if we close in 2 years." And they said, "Okay." So that wasn't just luck. I pushed it and I got a big cheap factory warehouse space now. But you're right. That's absolutely part of the formula. I can afford to sit on the inventory. I'm not really paying any overhead for it.
Yeah. Like for me, I've started to include storage, 3PL costs in my COGS because if I don't look at that, it really distorts the actual cost of goods sold.
What did you call it, Liz? 3PL? What's that?
Third-party logistics. So that's my the warehouse out in New Jersey that does all of the inventory management and also the shipping of our online purchases.
I would say to you, I'd be thinking about, I don't know what the exact situation is. I can only tell you, PPPs, for sure, the greatest thing the government's ever done. The next one is the SBA loans. Buy a building for 10% down. That's all I can tell you. It's made a huge difference in my business.
Well, Jay, the last time you said that on one of these episodes, my husband, Frank, who's a COO, heard it, and he kept talking to me about buying a warehouse, which we're just not in the position to do at all. I wish we could. Our storage costs are so high. I wish we could, but you've definitely planted it with him. It's really smart investment. It really is.
Well, especially with, the cost of capital. We're at this weird moment where cost of capital is really low, but inflation is just ratcheting up. So if you can get fixed assets, I think that's to your advantage.
If I can put my accounting hat on, I got to tell you, your return on investment when you only put 10% down on a building is phenomenal. You only got 10% down versus putting 30% down, which is a conventional loan. So if it works and you pull it off, you could never have as good an investment as that. So keep it in mind.
Liz, you mentioned before that you have ongoing supply chain issues. You've talked to us in previous episodes about your efforts to start manufacturing some of your products here in the U.S. Have you made any progress with that?
So we are going to be moving ahead with a small production of one of our trash enclosures with a metal fabricator in New Jersey, not too far from us. We began talking to them kind of in early fall, but then kind of put things on hold. The pricing on it is higher than we want to pay, as I've discussed before, but we want to do this as a test to at least have a U.S. factory or two as options, as well as, maybe we are going to have certain products that we would produce there that would be at the higher price, the USA price. It's definitely something we're striving for, and we also have a couple of government contracts in the works, and if those require made in the USA, then I'm going to be very glad to have that vendor. But my bids are going to be about 30% higher than they would be on product that's manufactured in China.
Now, when you say you have to bid at 30% higher, have you tried to keep the margin the same, or did you just take the margin down because you're still making the same dollars, if you know what I mean? Just because you pay 30% more for the product doesn't mean you have to sell it for 30% more. Have you changed your markup on when you're paying more?
I think we could. I wouldn't want to do it like across the board thing, which is why I'm trying to kind of keep it segregated to something that's product based. So let's say we might use that factory to produce in steel, and we normally produce in aluminum. So I could see that being something where then the premium in there is because it's steel, not aluminum. Even though aluminum is more expensive, but it has to do with the application of it. We use the steel ones are used for bear-proof enclosures.
I think people are getting more and more sensitive to the Made in America thing. I don't know what the number is. There's clearly a point of no return where they won't buy it, but I'm pretty confident people will pay more to get made in the USA. The question is how much more? And I don't have an answer to that.
Well, it's also an issue, though, now we have a war going on in Europe. The likelihood of all of our supply chain issues going away anytime soon just seems pretty remote.
I'm looking to diversify. I see that this year I'm probably going to start producing in China and in the U.S. I'm actually also looking into Mexico because all of these supply chain problems, I need to have the flexibility to place orders wherever I want. If I have a great order and they don't want my 4-month lead time, they demand 2, then I want to be able to produce in the U.S. and not charge a ton more. But right now, I don't have any options because it is all in China. So for me, it's not about totally getting it out of China because, as I've discussed here before, I have a very good relationship with my factory and I really don't want to disrupt that. But I want to have the option to produce in other places and also to appeal to certain clients that would require the made in the USA.
All right. I want to bring up a topic that Shawn suggested, which is how easy it seems to be for big companies to raise their prices. But let's just take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. I'm here with Rob Levin, co-founder of Work Better Now, which provides businesses with highly talented virtual assistants. Rob, I've noticed that owners tend to have certain questions about virtual assistants. For example, what exactly can they do?
Yeah, Lauren, we get this question all the time because people really know deep down that they need an assistant, but they're not exactly sure how it works and what they can do for them. I would say that our clients use our assistants in one of two ways. They will either use them, much like I've been using my assistant for the past 8 years, as an executive assistant, handling my calendar, which takes up so much time, email management, database, file management, personal tasks, creating documents for me. And then a lot of our clients basically operationalize our assistants. So we have assistants with titles like project manager, marketing associate, operations manager, and customer service representative.
I think some owners worry they'll spend more time managing their assistant than it would have taken them just to do the tasks themselves. How do you respond to that?
Right. This is a deadly trap, not only with assistants, but really with any employees, which is, I can do it faster myself. And the reality is you might be able to do it faster yourself. Of course, it's impossible to grow your business if you're doing everything yourself. I was very much of a similar mindset. And what I did with my assistant is I basically told him what needs to be done and had them document it. I hate documenting tasks, but I know the processes are so important. Now we have a manual full of my tasks. I only had to tell him once that he can follow time and time again. And if he's out, somebody else can follow. And also think about it this way. If you're a business owner making something like, let's say, $200,000 a year, which is about $100 an hour, you're basically paying somebody to do administrative work at $100 an hour if you're doing these tasks yourself.
That makes a lot of sense. What does it cost?
The cost is $1,900 a month. And as you know, Lauren, we are offering 21 Hats readers and listeners $150 off per month for 3 months just by mentioning the word Lauren. There are no contracts. Also very important for people to know.
Can you promise a return on that investment?
If you're not getting a return, something's not going right. All of our clients are not only getting a return with the first assistant they've hired, but many of our clients are now on their second, third, and fourth assistant.
Where can we learn more?
Workbetternow.com. And again, when you sign up for a 15-minute consult, just mention the word Lauren and we'll make sure to give that $150 off for each of the first 3 months.
Thanks, Rob. And we're back. As we recently highlighted in the morning report, public companies are not only raising their prices, but they're bragging about the extra profits those price increases are generating on their earning calls, which seems like a pretty bold move to me. Shawn, is there a lesson in that for small businesses? What are we to take from that?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, that's probably the reason I wanted to hear some other opinions on this. I mean, I think these large corporations, there's really no penalty for them talking like that. You know, I just don't think it influences buyer behavior really in any significant way. And I think it influences, stock price, which means it influences the bonus plans for the executives. It's just this self-fulfilling cycle of crap that hurts us all. So I'm just sort of curious, though, how inelastic or elastic it is in the small business space. I know if I were to go to my customers, be like, yeah, inflation, we're going to raise your prices by 25%. I would lose customers. Not only that, but they'd be really upset with me.
Especially if you told them that it's going to greatly increase your profits.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, you know what? It gets back to the price elasticity thing, which is simple. So the question is, if you raise your prices 10%, are you going to lose 10% of your customers? If you do, you're making more money because your costs have gone down by 10%. Now, the question is, are you going to lose 20% of your customers? And the problem with entrepreneurship is most people are worried about, oh my God, I'm going to lose all my customers. And that's simply not the case. If you got to raise your prices, you got to raise your prices.
I'm not surprised that public companies are raising prices and bragging about their profits to shareholders, because that is what corporations do. I don't want to say I don't fault them, but I'm not really surprised. But the biggest difference I would say with small business is that if we raise our prices, and I have twice, my second price raise during the pandemic is actually happening this week. The reason isn't to increase our profit. The reason we need to do it is to recapture margin, which is the obvious one, but it's also to be able to invest in growth. It's to be able to have a salary for both my husband and myself. Our entire income is tied to this business. So while I wouldn't tell my customers I'm raising prices so my husband and I can both be paid, that actually is the reason. I would never say that. I'm only saying that here among small business owners, but public corporation would never have that as an explanation. It's going to be the benefit to shareholders. That's the message.
But you just said this is the second time while the pandemic's been going on for 2 years, which means you've raised your prices once a year. That's what's normal. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do.
It is. But it's taken a while for us to come around to that, Jay. We have, like a lot of businesses, a little bit of guilt for raising them. But this one was really important to do. And we were able to really recalibrate our pricing across everything, which has been important too, because it really helps us with our margin analysis if it's not, it doesn't fluctuate as much.
Are you raising your prices for products across the board by the same percentage?
No, it depends on margin and volume.
Let me tell you an entrepreneur story about raising prices. It is the most tragic story I can think of being in Chicago. The greatest thin pizza in Chicago was right near me here, and his rent went up. This is a real story. So he goes ahead and he decides he needs to own a building. So he buys a building 2 or 3 miles away, opens up there, left his market, and then went broke. And I'm talking to him now a couple of years after the fact, and I said, why didn't you just raise your prices to cover the extra? Oh, I couldn't do that. People complain when I raise it 75 cents. And I said to myself, you just put yourself out of business because you listened to that one jerk out of 10 who complained about the price, who probably paid it anyway. All he needed to do was raise his pizza price $2 and he'd be around today. And I'm still mourning the loss because this was pizza of the gods, and everyone that works for me is still mourning. I'm telling you, it was, I don't know how he did it. It was magical. I'm still mourning this. And I realized that all someone had to do was convince him, stop. Yeah, we always have a customer complaining about price. It's not the majority. It's the one-off, and get over it. And yeah, so as lunch comes around, I'm mourning it again now.
2 things have been brought up here. One, which is many businesses fail to build their financial structure around paying the owner a market-based wage. So like Liz, you're like, well, we need to make a living. It's like, yeah, actually the business needs a CEO and the business needs a COO, right? Those are costs. And most, myself included, I was guilty of this for many years. We underpay ourselves and we're driven by emotion to do that. So that's problem number 1. And then problem number 2 is what Jay talks about, which is we're scared to raise prices, or we're scared to charge enough in order to make the business, really a viable going concern. And then we kind of excuse it away with like, well, I get to pick my own hours or da-da-da-da-da. It's like, yeah, but there's also a ton of risk in what you're doing. So you actually really need to make some money here because no one, you don't get unemployment if you go out of business.
The number one mistake I've made in business, there's no question about it. I was growing like crazy, doubling, and I had a very small bottom line, and I should have raised my prices 5%. It was the simplest thing in the world, and my accountant didn't tell me, and the banker did not tell me. I just kept banging my head against the wall, and it was stupid. I should have raised my prices 5%, and it would have slowed my growth down a little bit, and it would have doubled my bottom line or tripled my bottom line. So that is a rookie mistake in business. You need to get paid.
So Liz, how concerned are you about this week's price increase and whether it will be accepted or not?
I'm not super worried about it. We are a premium product. We're an expensive product. Most people that we sell to are buying expensive things, and expensive things during the pandemic have been, price increased as well. So I think that people are used to having prices raised on premium products. The one that we need to be careful about are customers who have outstanding estimates. So we did a little bit of kind of a splitting of the list. The messaging is different for each one because we do want to give people who have outstanding estimates an opportunity to pay. I think we gave them until April 1st. But that's also a mechanism for us to encourage them to pay because then they do know that it's going to increase. And, we're looking forward to seeing how our sales are in March because I think it's going to stimulate a lot of those people to move ahead.
No, that is smart and responsible, and I'm sure they appreciate getting a last shot to get in on it. But Lauren, your question's a little false in that it's not will it be accepted.
We go again.
Yes. No, this is a good one. You said will it be accepted? The answer is some will accept it and some won't. And the problem is the person that goes, oh my God, that's too much money. You're going to think, oh, it's because I raised prices. No, they would have said that at your old price too. So there's no exact way of knowing, but there will certainly be some business lost, but it'll make up for, it'll be made up for the fact that everyone else is paying the right price.
Well, Liz, you do have an advantage in that you're not selling to repeat customers who are acutely aware of what the price used to be and offended that it's going up. You're looking for new customers mostly, right?
No, actually, that's not right. About 30 to 40% of our customers are repeat customers.
Whoa. Wow.
Well, that makes sense.
These are property managers who are expanding their...
Yes. I mean, in the B2B space. For B2C, yeah, it's one and done. But for property managers, architects, developers, government, that whole class, they are repeat business. And we'll see. We haven't had a lot of pushback.
Here's the opposite question. How would they not expect there to be a price increase, for God's sakes? Who's going to think you're going to be keeping the prices? That doesn't make any sense. Right. Everyone knows it's going up. They're waiting to see whether it's 4% or whether it's 11%. That's all. And do you know what the percent's going to be?
Well, on some products, it's going to be 5%. On another, it's going to be 25%, where we've been underpricing it for a while.
And I'll presume that the 25% is because that raw materials went up a lot, which we hear about every single day in the news. So I don't think anybody should be shocked.
All right, we've got just a little bit of time left, and I have just one more foolish question to ask, which is for you, Jay. I've been thinking about this for some time, and it just never quite coalesced. But I'm curious. You almost always answer questions and discuss your business in terms of your picture framing business. You rarely mention Jason Home, your home furnishings business. And I'm just, do you not feel as invested in that?
It's a simple, I started the framing business. I'm fully involved with the framing business, and I have much less to do with the home store. I'm not the buyer there. It wasn't my it was my idea to open a furniture store, but I have some very talented people that have been running it since the beginning, and I'm far less involved with it. So it's not the first thing that comes to mind when there's no comparison. I'm 10% involved with that business and 90% involved with the framing business. So it's not my area of expertise.
Could you describe what your role is? How involved do you get in running that business?
All of my employees would like to know that too. So my involvement is there's occasionally I'll talk about, the bigger picture stuff. I am the proverbial, I'm working on the business, not in the business. I might talk about, margins or inventory levels but I've learned to stay out of the day-to-day stuff because it's not they buy some stuff. And I used to say it out loud. I don't say it anymore. I go, who's going to buy this? And then 30 seconds later, someone comes, oh my God, look. And I just learned it's not my expertise. So, I oversee a little bit, but not much. And it's in framing, I'm not that involved there either. Like I used to be, but I've been involved from the framing thing, from cutting the frames myself to putting them together to the whole thing. And in the furniture store, if I had to jump in and replace somebody, I couldn't do it. It's not my thing.
Which is the bigger business?
Actually, the furniture store is bigger than the retail framing, though if you take the retail framing and add the wholesale frames I sell nationally, it's about the same size. So the furniture store is it's a major piece of the puzzle. I'm the first to tell you, in a million years, I wouldn't have predicted where I would have ended up 40 years ago. No one's more surprised than I am. I can't tell you I had some master plan. I just, I think I'm fairly good at seeing an opportunity and leveraging what I know. And the fact is, all of my businesses are connected by design. Little double meaning there. Do you get it?
Mm-hmm.
They're all related. They all got customers that want nicer stuff and better service, authentic customer service. They're in the home furnishing. So they are connected in that, but they also have a design element. So it was a natural progression.
Was it your idea?
Yeah. No, I figured out, I remember very few things from college, but one of them was if the railroads understood that they weren't in the railroad business and they figured they were in the transportation business, they would own all the airlines. And I realized I'm in the home furnishing business. So when I was really busy in framing and I had some extra space on the first floor, I thought, gee, I ought to sell something else to the customers that are waiting. And I started selling home furnishings. And that's how I got into it. So that's called horizontal integration, selling different things to the same people. And but it was not my expertise to actually execute it. One of my prouder things is I have a guy that's a key player in that business that has a theater degree and was making $12 an hour when I hired him. And now he's the major guy running the thing, one of the major people. So I think I'm good at two things, leveraging what I have. And two is finding diamonds in the rough and developing them and keeping them and making them happy. And that pretty much describes my whole business. So you're not wrong. I'm far less involved with the home store, though, which frustrates all my framing people. When you meet someone and you tell them I work for Artist Framing Service, some of them go, oh, I know it. But then when you say, I also own Jason Home. Oh my God, Jason Home. I love Jason Home. I take all my friends there when they're, and it goes into this whole thing. And it's like we feel, the people in the framing feel like we're the stepchild and Jason Home is the star. But it is what it is. I mean, we sell Jason Home has a national presence. We're selling nationally on the website.
I think, honestly, this could be a whole nother show, which is specialization versus horizontal integration. And for a long time, the message was go in a niche, do one thing, do it really well.
Stick to your knitting.
Yes, right. That was that's the whole good to great message, et cetera. And you've gone the opposite direction. I think we're starting to see now, especially with bigger companies like Apple, where they're both vertically integrated and horizontally integrated, they're the ones who are winning.
No, and so am I. I sell wholesale to other frame shops. So I have done both. But what I didn't want to do is start opening frame stores around the country because I have no interest in doing that.
Right. Yeah. All right. There's your next show or some show down the road, Lauren.
Good job, Lauren. Excellent 100. Congratulations to you for pulling this off.
Congratulations, Lauren.
Yeah. Congratulations. Yeah. And good question to end it with. That was a great question.
Oh, thank you, Shawn. All right. My thanks to Shawn Busse, Jay Goltz, and Liz Picarazzi. As always, thanks for sharing. Wait. Don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN @21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Production. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.